Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. After a wonderful weekend, Ayo.
I saw that. You broke the internet on Saturday.
We tried small. Good morning, Rafai. How are you doing?
Good. Bless you.
Good. Let me tell you about what is happening around the world. Let's start in Syria, where a week after Bashar al-Assad's toppling, there's been a worldwide scrabble to track down his henchmen who are responsible for implementing his reign of terror in Syria. The plan is to apprehend them and start a justice process. One war crimes investigator had described as being bigger than the Nuremberg trials. Now, though the total number of Syrians who have been killed is unknown, the United Nations estimates that since 2011, more than 300,000 civilians have lost their lives and at least 100,000 Syrians have been forcibly disappeared. Now, the US has made direct contact with the HTS rebels who now control Syria after toppling the Assad regime. That's according, of course, to Secretary of State Antony Blinken. It is the first acknowledgement of direct American contact with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which the US currently still designates as a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, the likes of Israel continue to take advantage of the uncertainty that we're seeing in Syria, approving a plan to encourage the expansion of settlements in the occupied Golan Heights, thereby encroaching on more Syrian land. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he wants to double the population of the Golan Heights, which Israel seized during the 1967 Six-Day War and is considered illegally occupied under international law. Now, to the African continent now, and Cyclone Chido, a Category 4 storm, has made catastrophic landfall in Mozambique, unleashing winds of up to 160 miles per hour and 10 inches of rain in just the first 24 hours. Mozambique has been especially vulnerable to natural disasters. This time, Save the Children has warned 650,000 children and their families are in danger. Based on the path taken, the greatest damage is likely to be in Cabo Delgado, Memba and Nampula, areas that are all home to vulnerable communities already facing high levels of deprivation. The presence of armed groups in the area is also likely to hamper access to humanitarian aid. This is after, of course, the cyclone had left up to 1,000 people feared dead in the French territory of Mayotte as entire settlements were flattened by Cyclone Chido, with the poorest living in makeshift shelters particularly hard hit. And lastly, just as we had discussed during the World Brief, there is, of course, the story of ECOWAS. I know that you've talked about it at length, but there's also, despite the, I guess there's a lower level of morale with the departure of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, but there's also, I guess, the excitement coming with the news of this highway that will link Abidjan to Accra, and Lomé, and Lagos, essentially all of the West Coast port cities. And so I'd imagine that there is something to look forward to in terms of replicating what we were seeing with the European Union, perhaps creating some form of a trade hub along the West African coast.
Femi, with you as well, I'm not excited because they've been talking about that highway since 19 It's always been in the works. In fact, I think a couple of years ago, it's supposed to be over 1,000 kilometers thereabout. Afrexim Bank was talking about, putting some injection into it. I was in Abidjan in 2023, and I had some conferences that I attended. I was leading the conversation. So the question is, when are these highways going to come? We can't keep talking about it forever. We need to be able to interconnect across all of these areas. Our own part of the road, the bad portion, we should fix that. As regards what is happening in Syria, I'm sure the world, the very hypocritical world, is seeing Israel now. They are using this as an opportunity to encroach on land, scratching the 1974 agreement, encroaching on land. Netanyahu will say he wants to populate Golan Heights. They are seeing them now. So if a group now says, we want to fight Israel off our land, Israel will now say, no. They'll start decimating everybody like they're doing in Palestine now. They can now see what Israel is doing now, the insincerity of Israel. All of this only happened because you had an impasse in Syria and you don't have any leadership to be able to protect that area. When Syria gets its act together at some point and they want to fight back, they'll say, possibly retake their land now. Israel will be crying foul. And a lot of Zionists out there will now support them, will now be quoting Bible for you, and you can't destroy Zion and everything. They are seeing this now. They will not talk now. Because I can't just stand the hypocrisy of the world, especially the Western world. And the West, all of a sudden, that put this terrorist group, and Jolani, the leader of this terrorist group, on the watch list prior to now, all of a sudden is now saying, okay, we're having relations with them.
Dialogue.
We are opening dialogue with them. We are talking to them and all of that. The most important thing about Syria, if you don't want this to be an international hotbed for proxy war, please return that country back to democracy. All the civil rights activists have been in other countries. They've gone on exile. Bring them back to the country. And as regards finding people that have done a lot of heinous crime, I think the likes of Lakhdar Brahimi, at some point when the Syria crisis started, we're supposed to lead the envoy. They had an investigative report where they knew all of these people. These people should be allowed to come and account for their crimes, like it happened in Nuremberg. It's only fair, to the world. And also like it happened as regards the Truth and Reconciliation trial that happened in South Africa. It's a very bad cyclone that is coming out there in Mozambique. It has gusting winds of over 200 kilometers, which is very sad. Came out of the French territory of Mayotte, and it's been hurting a lot of people. We all know the tale about Mozambique, a lot of poverty across board. It might affect about 1.7 million people in Mozambique, about 440,000 people in Malawi. It's a very sad one, but the emergency unit should be able to step in and help them.
Yeah, the emergency unit, the responses have been quite strong, not just from Mozambique alone, but from neighboring countries which have been said to also be affected by it. Even South Africa, Eswatini, Tanzania, and countries around there are said to have already been hit by Cyclone Chido. Now, one of the things that, of course, this is going to give rise to is the crisis, humanitarian crisis, refugees who are going to migrate to the countries around them, and even the neighboring countries' preparation in terms of their response to receive this influx of people. You already talked about how poor these areas that have been affected, sadly, by the cyclone are, and how it's going to even deepen poverty even more. And the years of, trying to restore, repair after the devastating effect of this. Again, it just points to climate change and the way that the world is changing. Heavy rainfalls are expected in other parts of that part. The countries I've mentioned already. It's just to see how prepared these countries are. And I want to hope that West African countries like Nigeria would not think that they are far removed from this. We already have seen floodings, flash floods, and just to begin to see what our response would be. Imagine, God forbid, we had this kind of disaster. I don't know if we'll be able to cope. So let's begin to think about this thing, because this is the reality of the world, and also think of investing in reversing the effect of climate change in our environment. This is what we talked about at COP29 just a few months back. It's important that we don't see it as a Western challenge. We begin to see the effects of this across countries on the African continent. Beyond that, according to the US, the reason why they established contact with the rebels, HTS rebels, is significantly the US journalist, Austin Tice, and that they're just trying to see how they can work. But I think very importantly, a statement made by the Iraqi foreign minister is what we've consistently said on this table, which is terrorism shouldn't take advantage of a transition period. And that's what I believe the countries involved are trying to avoid, because if they're not careful, they'll have another Libyan situation on their hands. And that's what they're trying to avoid. So they must be very circumspect in the way that they handle and manage this situation so as to avoid another Libyan situation.
Let me start by commenting on Israel. Yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu offered an address in which he was saying that Israel has no plans to get involved in the internal affairs of Syria, but at the same time, it has a responsibility to defend itself. And I made the point here on this table before now. One, that what we face is what will happen after the fall of Assad and the takeover of Damascus. Also, because there are many factions involved. The Syrian, Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, the Syrian National Army, the Syrian Opposition Forces, the HTS. The only man that is out there now is al-Shara, also known as al-Jolani. But there will be other forces. So there are concerns about the future. But Israel decided to take preemptive strike. But in international law, in the law of armed conflict, it's about proportionality. Israel, since December 8, has carried out 450 strikes against Damascus, destroying chemical weapons and military sites, according to the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights that is based in the UK. In the last 72 hours, they've had 78 strikes against Israel, and yet Israel says we don't want to conquer territory. But he made it clear yesterday that they are going to expand their territory in the Golan Heights, which was seized in 1967 during the Six-Day War, and which is not internationally recognized. The UN considers it an illegally occupied territory. It is only the United States that recognizes Israel in the Golan Heights. The same US, through Anthony Blinken, says he's talking to one of the parties involved. Hypocrisy on both sides. And those are the details in that regard. What is the future? Netanyahu does not have the full support of his own people. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert made it clear that, look, we don't need to expand in Golan Heights. Israel already has 30 settlements in the Golan Heights. It wants to continue to expand it. So the future of Syria, is clouded. About ECOWAS, I already spoke about ECOWAS earlier on. 2 quick points. One of the issues that they are concerned about is security. Now, with the 3 countries saying that they are pulling out, now what happens to security in the Sahel region? Because there will also still be need for cooperation. President Tinubu outlined his own achievements, what he's been able to do with terrorism, with dialogue, and all of that. And then you talked about the highway.
Yes.
Yeah, that highway. There's commitment of about, $15.8 million pledges. Those ECOWAS countries, it's not for nothing. That Toure pointed out that it's only Nigeria that has paid up in terms of its membership dues.
Yes.
Those other countries, can they pay? At the end of the day, they will push it to Nigeria, and Nigeria will be under unnecessary pressure. Cyclone, the conflict between man and nature, which happens, all over the world. Yes. But UNICEF in Mozambique is moving in to help. Mayotte, the island of Mayotte, is in the Indian Ocean.
Yes.
It's a French territory. It depends on French aid. It has a population of 320,000 people. 75% of the population is living below the poverty line. France says it will help, but we keep having this challenge between man and nature. Indeed. And also, between the environment and man, and also climate change. It's not a problem that will end. But what is important is how humanity supports itself.
Thank you, Dr. Abati. Well, let's move on to our newspapers now. And just as we discussed during the World Brief, this day leads with ECOWAS reluctantly okaying the exit of Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso from the bloc on January 29, 2025. There was also the commendation of Ghana's transparent presidential election as President Nana Akufo-Addo nears the end of his term. If we take a look at the Daily Independent, we'll also see reports on President Tinubu's encouragement of ECOWAS states to emulate the success of Ghana's election, to the New Telegraph, and it leads with news of Nigerian carrier Asman, which has been accused of helping to bypass sanctions against the Iranian aviation industries by the United States Treasury Department by clandestinely supplying its aircraft. The Iranian government is believed to be seeking to exploit the decline of US and French influence in sub-Saharan Africa to increase its political, economic, and military influence on the continent. And that article says Nigerian carriers helping them do it. Well, the Daily Trust this morning looks at a breakdown of states' 2025 budget proposals. 32 states budgeted for 22 trillion naira. The top 3 states in terms of this budget are Lagos, no surprises there, Niger and Ogun. To the Punch now, and council autonomy leads this morning's edition of the Punch. Local governments remain uneasy over the implementation of the Supreme Court's order that they would be in control of their own allocated funds. Let's take a look at 2 UK papers now. Both the Guardian and the Daily Mail of the United Kingdom lead with the UK's relations with China. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has admitted the government has a complex arrangement with China because of the need of economic cooperation. This is, of course, happening against the backdrop of the exclusion of an alleged Chinese spy with links to Prince Andrew. The man, who was banned from Britain by the government on national security grounds, was invited to the Duke of York's birthday party and visited Buckingham Palace twice as well as St. James's Palace and Windsor Palace. So this is all happening, of course, at the...
Intelligence, they never caught all this, all
Could
this
you believe they didn't?
Can you...
Slipped under the radar.
And they slipped under the radar. Really? So much more for British intelligence. I thought somebody said that's the most perfect intelligence and the most perfect police system
I've
in
heard
the
that
world.
once or twice.
Somebody said that.
And there's been a breach of this type.
And there's a breach of this type in Britain. But somebody was hailing, say, when I got to Britain, the police system was very... Was it not the British police system that a police officer that raped somebody and
Wayne
killed...
Cousins, was that not him? I believe that was his name.
And raped somebody and
Kidnapped her, raped and killed her, yes.
And it was said that the British police hierarchy did not investigate properly. That led to the ouster of that. What's her name? Cressida what?
Cressida Dick.
Cressida Dick. Is that not Britain?
Okay. Same country.
Same country?
Same one.
Moving
Same
on.
one.
Okay.
Same one.
Real quickly, as I wrap up, hope those states with their big 22 trillion budget, hope they are making the IGR to support it. I rest my case.
All right, so the Punch newspaper headline you took, and this is it's one thing for the court to rule, it's another to implement, and this is for the local government allocations. The local governments in the states are 775 kicking because the last allocation was paid to the state government.
Yes.
This is 6 months after the Supreme Court ruling that, of course, we talked about, debated a lot of times. So it would be great to understand why this is still the case. It's a Supreme Court ruling, so they cannot, that's the final court. So it would be interesting to understand the reason why, maybe because of the conversation around some of these states not yet holding their local government elections. But we know that some of them already did that. Rivers, a number of states had already come out to do this. So it'll be interesting to understand. But just highlighting the fact that the rule of law must be seen to be upheld and obeyed in this, in this state. But it even comes from the center, who sends the money to the states. So before we begin to cry wolf, it'll be interesting to know the local government, what's the setup? Do they have their houses in order?
Right, are you ready?
Yeah, are you ready to receive? So those are some of the conversations that we should be having. The NULGE are kicking against this, but it's to spotlight it. If the court has ruled, let it be implemented, let it be effective, and let the local government councils or local government areas begin to exercise their autonomy.
Thank you, Ayo.
Okay, very quick point. Daily Trust front page, budget from the states. Yeah, we have seen quite a number of the states presenting their budgets. The question that Nigerians should ask is, where is President Tinubu's budget for 2025? This is December. December is almost ending. Okay, have they announced that they will present it on Tuesday? Okay, but where is the time to consider it and to keep within the framework of the budget cycle that the APC started promising under President Buhari? Now, quickly, in Britain. Now, the issue about the Chinese spy.
Yes.
It's about the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, who is said to be very friendly with a 50-year-old Chinese member of the Communist Party, and who has been invited to high-profile events at Windsor Castle and to other events at St. James's Palace. And then it was found out by the MI5 that then said, look, this person has been banned from coming to the UK. As for Duke of York himself, palace sources are saying, well, he's one of the 20 people that have been invited to Christmas party by his brother, the King of England, and that maybe he should save the palace and the embarrassment by uninviting himself and not show up either for the walk to the church on Christmas Day or for the Christmas lunch, at this occasion. MPs are now threatening that Chinese should be named, and that there should be a review of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, FIRS as it is called. So these are the issues in Britain.
They are.
Apart from the fact that over 50,000 old people may not enjoy winter.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adefemi. Looking very Christmassy in your red.
We're trying. Thank you so much.
See you again tomorrow morning.
See you tomorrow.